All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Stephen Krutzfeldt. I'm a pre-sales engineer here with CDI, and I'm going to be taking you through this month's consulting webinar, which is going to be around designing and deploying public portals using Laserfiche Weblink. So first of all, if this is your first time attending one of our build-alongs, what is a build-along? It is an interactive experience designed to guide the viewer through the creation and deployment of a common business process. Now for today's example, we're going to be working with Laserfiche Weblink. So if you have Laserfiche Weblink, you can take this time to log in, get in there, and actually follow along as we create and design a public portal. If at any point you need help, please post the questions in the chat box, and I'll take some time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you may have. That can be found on the little floating GoToWebinar window. I think it's the bottom one. You can expand that and add the chat. There's also a questions box too. I'll look at both of them. There's not really a right or wrong way to post your questions. In order to get the most out of today's webinar, take good notes. I personally like to take screenshots whenever possible. I find those are a little bit more helpful in remembering how to go back through and perform the different various tasks that we'll be looking at today. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Chances are if you have the question, somebody else has it also. So post those. And I believe there's going to be a survey afterwards. We do look at those and use that to decide what we're going to present on next, what we did well, what we can improve upon, things like that. We appreciate your feedback. And know that this will be recorded and should be posted to YouTube by the end of the day. So if you feel like we're moving a little bit quickly, know that you'll have the opportunity to go back, rewatch, pause, rewind, etc. All right, so for today's process, we're going to be designing a public portal in Weblink. The intended audience for this webinar is going to be Laserfiche admins and advanced users of Laserfiche. We're going to need access to Laserfiche Weblink. We'll also be using the Laserfiche client as well as the admin console. To help you follow along, we're going to begin by looking at a couple of already deployed portal examples of people who are actually using the Laserfiche Weblink and actually have portals live. We'll then do an introduction to Weblink, and then we'll go through the build along. The build along is going to include some of the steps on how to actually configure the portal itself. We'll also talk a little bit about security, where it's going to be installed, and all the different steps that you'll need in order to get this thing up and running and live and working correctly. So with that, let's go ahead and start by, first of all, what is Weblink? In a nutshell, Laserfiche Weblink is the web portal that enables the organizations to share read-only versions of specific documents with the public online. So think about visiting a website. Specifically, this is very common in municipalities, cities, other public groups where things like meeting agendas, minutes, things like that can be made public. This is a good way to take your already built and deployed Laserfiche repository, some of those public folders, and then just put it out there for anyone to go through, browse, and read through those documents. This way, the main value is that they no longer have to call in and inundate you with emails and phone calls and requests for documents. They can simply log into the portal and find those and download them themselves. This is an example of just a snapshot I took of the West Covina. One of our clients is using the portal today. This is more or less what it's going to look like. And I'll actually bring up a couple of examples of what those look like live as well. So this is Jefferson. And actually, the way I found these, I literally just Googled Laserfiche Weblink, just because I was curious of what was going to come up, and these are the ones that it showed us. As you can see that once you log in, it'll automatically bring you to a search area. Those of you who are Laserfiche users will recognize that that's the same sort of quick search tool that you would use to browse your own repository. You'll also have the option to go through and actually browse the folders as well. So here we see another example. This one has the quick link, but then also the quick search, but then also quick links to take us specifically to minutes or specifically to one of the other ones. In addition to searching, you also have the ability to kind of go through and browse those different folders. A common way that most of these are set up publicly, and what I like to do when I'm working with clients who are working to deploy this, is keep it very intuitive and clear. So if you have, keep minutes separated, agendas separated, and then if you can add subfolders for year folders, I find that's very helpful as well. I would say the month folders are not necessarily required. Some folks like to use them if they have a lot of documents. In this case, it looks like it would make sense. But depending on how many documents you're saving each month, especially into each one of those individual folders, like minutes or agendas, resolutions, things like that, you may not necessarily need month folders, but it is an option. Same thing here, we see the Village of Deerfield. They can browse ordinances or resolutions or just do a quick search. But you'll also notice that even though I'm logging in as a public user, I have access to all these read-only documents. I can browse through each one of them. And when it opens up, it'll open up in the very similar view and style as the web client of Laserfiche. The only difference is you're not going to be able to necessarily interact with any of the metadata. Like you won't, of course, be able to make any changes or anything like that, but sometimes you will be able to see annotations like highlighting, redactions, things like that. And you can also go through and just copy this, see the additional attributes, information about that, when it was created, when it was modified, path, things like that. Last example, City of Orange. Pretty similar. When we open up these documents, we can view the pages and everything else. So you'll notice that the user interface is very similar to that of Laserfiche because, of course, it's actually opening up an instance of Laserfiche, just it's restricted to the public user. So it's read-only, and you're not going to be able to necessarily save or anything like that, but it's, like I said, this is all completely public. I just Googled each one of these and was able to go through. Another valuable piece of this is I've had a lot of questions from folks who are wondering, how should I set up my repository? How should I set up my folder structure? Knowing that these are out here now and knowing that you can just Google Laserfiche Weblink or Laserfiche portal and see these, you can start looking at how other cities are structuring their folders and their groups and things like that. So another good resource. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the demo. Now, Laserfiche Weblink is this little icon right here, and this is the designer. Now, the designer should be ideally downloaded or rather installed on a type of DMZ that, in order to mitigate risk, make sure that you're not exposing too much of your Laserfiche environment to the outside elements. We'll want to make sure that there's the ability to publish and view the documents, but no one's actually getting into the Laserfiche server. So we want to make sure that that's separated. Now, the designer is set up with some basic, I guess, kind of programming functions that you would normally see in like HTML or CSS, but it's giving you the chance to work with the actual look and feel and layout of the public portal with, even if you don't know any of the programming languages, which any of you who have been on my webinars in the past know that I am not a developer, I'm not a programmer. I always like to say that I can read HTML, but I can't write it. I can look at it, kind of know what's going on, but that's about it. So what this will do is give you, we're just gonna kind of start from the first tab here. It's gonna give you the option to start changing some of the links and things like that. At any time, we have the preview option, so we can go ahead and actually just look at the preview now and see that there's just, actually it's a login. Normally this would log in automatically with a public user. We'll talk about that in a second. So it's pretty vanilla here. I've got the little CDI logo up in the top right-hand corner, and I can go and browse through our public folders. And then there's some, we can see our different folders here. We can see that so there's some border color, some ways to view drop downs here, but nothing too fancy. And what little we do see here is all done from that designer. So it's pretty basic. On the basic colors, it'll ask us what you want your background color to be. You can keep it white. If there's an alternate background color, you can do that as well. So you can start messing with some of these. One thing that I like to show folks that I find it to be very handy is there's a application that you can just download for free that I like to use, especially when I'm trying to put new themes and colors on things. And I think it's just called the color picker. Like I think if you just Google color pick, it'll be kind of a plugin on in Google or in Chrome. So what you can do is just take this and hover over different colors and things like that, and it will actually it'll tell you what the color is. There we go. Is this what we want? I don't usually use it in here. Let's try something else. So for example, City of Orange here, if I want to know exactly what that color is, I could click on that and it'll actually give me the RGB code for that, the F7832E. So if we wanted to then copy that, we could do that. And so then if we wanted to make sure we had the exact approved theme or the exact color when we're creating our portal, bring that back. Then we can go ahead and copy that in, and then we'll see that it'll actually give it that specific color. So that's a really handy tool. Again, I think if you use Google color picker, you should find it. Let me know if you have any issues with that. I'll add some different, just something to be aware of is that if you're adding images, you'll want to be aware of how large they are or how small they are as well. That you'll want to find a way to get those to the right size before you save them. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues with it looking kind of weird, kind of off and wonky. It takes a little while to get that working. One way to get them the right size though is to just open them in Microsoft Paint, and there's a good way to kind of expand things, trim them, and save them in different sizes. If that's something that you'd like more information on, feel free to reach out to me. I've done this a couple times in the past, but to actually just go ahead and give you an example. If we wanted to save this one, put the left pane background on and preview. What we might do also is a trick to do a hard reset on these as well. If you hit F12, it'll bring this up, and then you can actually use Control to refresh, and it'll do like a hard reset. So any changes you make will take effect. So if I went into public portal now we can see that it added the left pane in the background, and yeah, that's kind of nice, but it's really distracting and probably not something that anyone's gonna be like, oh wow, that looks really nice. No, not really. So play around with it a few times, see what works and what doesn't. I think with me, you'll find that less is more when creating this. So we go ahead and say no image, but it does give you the capability to add your logo as a main logo, welcome page logo like you saw before. You can add backgrounds, so anything that you have saved, feel free to add those to give it a little bit extra flair, if you will, as you saw in some of our examples. The advanced option is more or less the same. The welcome page can have its own background, the side banner can have its own background here. When you're actually viewing the documents, if you want to change some of that, we have some here as well. So there's basic colors that advance. No, we're not going to save that. So the next theme, the welcome page, this is going to become a little bit more important. You can give it a title. What is this going to be called? I called mine Laserfiche Portal. It's pretty straightforward. You can add additional text underneath, a quick and easy way to access city documents. You can choose to turn that search box on or off. Honestly, I don't think I've seen anybody turn it off. That it's certainly helpful to have that really quick option, like, all right, what are you looking for? Tell us what in a few words. So being able to quickly search for minutes or quickly search for agendas or resolutions, that's really helpful, I think, to have that. And then you'll need to tie it to or point it to a specific repository. In this case, we only have one repository set up for this, and it's our government repository. but you'll need to select that. And then also adding the different links, making sure that you're pointing to specific folders. It'll show you and give you an idea of what's being shown and what's not. But this is, I guess, a good time as any to go into how we're accessing this. So if we open up the admin console, you'll know that admin console is a good place to set up your different users and start adding security restrictions and things like that. You can then go in and to the actual folders and assign security per folder or per groups of folders. If you want to get more into or learn more about setting up user security and licensing and all that, I think we do have a couple of videos out there. You can also reach out to our team. We'd be more than happy to work with that for you. Essentially, there's 3 steps, depending on which package you have. The first one would be setting up the user and the license, often done in LFDS with the newer versions. Once licensed, we can add them into the admin console here. So under LF Government, under Users and Groups, we actually have a user called Public. And so oftentimes when we're visiting those other websites that they already have this deployed, there's probably some sort of public user in the background that they've added in here. So when that public user is added, if we look at their basic rights, we'll see that they have the ability to search and print, and that's about it. They're a very limited user. So the next piece then, if we go into our Laserfiche repository, into LF Government, we see that we have a public folder. Now, when maintaining this and making your documents public, you'll also need to be making sure that you're saving your documents essentially in 2 different locations. One in the main area where they're going to reside. Oftentimes that's records or record management. And the second piece is going to be to have a shortcut that's saving it to the public folder so the public can go in and browse and read those different documents. Usually when I am setting up and helping different municipalities deploy Laserfiche, what I'll do is set up a quick and easy workflow that will take a document that is saved to records and basically have a question asked, like, is this a public document or not? If it's public, then when they save it, it'll automatically go into the public folder and save a shortcut to it. So like December minutes. In that case, actually this one doesn't look like it's a shortcut, but normally this would be a shortcut document, so that way it's being retained in the records location for security purposes, but then it will also be viewable by the public here as well. That way you're not giving access to all of your records, it's only the ones that you've flagged as public. So what's also happening in the background here, if we right click on this, we can go down and see the access rights. The access rights are going to be the actual security. Now I have mine set up so everyone can basically view everything in here, and that's just because this is a demo machine. But what'll be important is that the public user only has the ability to view, browse, read, and that's about it. They can't add anything, they can't modify anything, they can't delete anything. So that's very important when you're actually setting up the portal and making it function and work. Because when the public logs in, they're essentially using that public login and those public login credentials, just recognizing that and assigning the security and deciding what they can see and what they can't see. So the second step then would be just make sure that everything below here, we are inheriting our rights. And so at the top, the public is able to view only, and then we inherit those rights down so it goes and carries through each one. We don't have to reassign rights at every single level for every single year folder or anything like that. Once again, security can be a bit of a complicated conversation, but our team is ready, willing, and able to help you understand that structure, help work with you to deploy that and make sure that everything is buttoned up the way it needs to be. Anyway, back to the public portal creator or designer. So once we've added that, we can now see that we're viewing, or our public user is going to be able to view the public folders only. And we're going to include the search box. From a navigation standpoint, you have the option to share the welcome page link, the show folder browser link, show the search pane link that you've got, the option to turn on and turn off some of the different features. If you're curious what each one of those do, you can always save it and then go back and preview it. And I don't know why it keeps sending me out. So with everything turned on, looks like we didn't turn that off yet, so we should take that out. But this is more or less what it's beginning to look like. We also added that option to show every other row. Kind of obnoxious. I'm getting a little bit of a Halloween type of a vibe from this now, but it works. And this is why you go through and kind of test it and see what you're going to be able to see and what you're going to be able to, what everything's going to look like for your public before you deploy this as well. All right, so from the document viewer standpoint, it's going to give you some information or options rather, if you want to be able to pan across everything, if you want to be able to zoom. What is the default zoom level? Do you want to fit it to the page or do you want to fit it to the width? So there's some responsiveness that's happening here. What's really cool about this too is that since this is public and it's accessed through a URL, that means that users can also view this from a cell phone or a tablet. So depending on how these settings are set up, how clean or how easily they can view and browse those documents will be, I guess, you'll be able to see how well you can view it from a cell phone and like what that view looks like. We can choose to show the different breadcrumbs, which is the ability to go back and forth through the different levels of the folders. Highlight search results, show annotations. Annotations, when we talk about that, we're talking about highlighting, sticky notes, stamps, redactions. There's a couple of different ones out there, but basically anything else that the user has added to that document to give it additional information or flair. That does not include metadata though. Metadata is separate. You also have the options to show how your search results are going to show up. I'm once again, a fan of less is more type of thing. So I show a lot of these as minimized, but you've got these 5 different options. So entry properties, do you want to show different entry properties or do you want to hide them? And it'll show you in real time what that looks like. So if we were to hide everything right off the bat, you'll see that the search comes up with not a lot of additional information. But if you want to show the metadata, it'll give you all the metadata right below it. Can be a bit obnoxious. Oftentimes I'll say show but minimize. That way you can open up what you want. I think that's probably the best way to go. Otherwise, especially in some of those where any search can bring up 50 some hits, if you have a lot of additional information that you're showing right off the bat, it can get a little obnoxious and a little bit difficult to go through and view. Same thing with like thumbnails. If you want to see thumbnails, you do have that option. But if you've got a lot of documents out there that are 30 pages long, once again, it's going to take up a lot of space, take a long time to scroll. Probably better to just go ahead and hide that. Then when they open up the document, they'll be able to see the pages, or the thumbnails rather, over on the left-hand side in the margins. And you can move them around, move them up and down, so where those are actually going to be viewed at. And lastly, we have the search options. Do you want to enable search by text or just by entry names? Do you want to be able to search by fields? When it says fields, it's referring to metadata fields. So if there's a specific metadata field that you want them to be able to search by, we can turn that on. Fuzzy search, we actually have a YouTube video out there where I go through searching in quite a bit of detail. And one of the topics that we talk about is fuzzy search. Fuzzy search is maybe spelling's not your strong suit. And so you want to be able to make sure that you're still finding what you're looking for, even if it's misspelled. The fuzzy search can give you the ability to say, like, if you type Stephen in with a V instead of a PH, it'll still pull up Stephen. Now, when you actually set up the fuzzy search in Laserfiche, that'll be kind of by the user, and so you'll need to dial it up or dial it back depending on how fuzzy you want the search to get and how many hits you want to get for each one of those. I think it's by percentage. So if you say something like 20% fuzzy search, and that'll mean that anything that has 10 letters long, if 2 letters are incorrect, it's close enough, it'll bring it back. Great example, my last name, Krutzfeldt. It's very German. There's only 2 vowels and a whole bunch of consonants, and it's very rare that somebody gets it right on the first try. So if you're trying to type in Krutzfeldt and you forget that there's a Z in there, and you forget the D at the end of my last name, like, it'll still pull back Krutzfeldt because it's close enough. Not that I'm going to test it right now, but I think that's a good way to look at it. So once all this is ready to go, this can be published and deployed. They're on your team or on your IT team. The portal itself is going to be deployed as a URL. It basically is a portal into the web client of Laserfiche. So in order to get that, we can provide that URL, but that URL will then have to be put onto your city webpage in order to actually browse to or navigate to it from there. But that's easy enough. You just talk to whoever designed your webpage, whoever has admin access to that, and they can drop that wherever it makes sense logically. So with that, I know we went through that kind of quick. If you want additional resources, I always love talking about Laserfiche Answers. That's our online user community. As you've seen already, there are a lot of people out there using this who have already deployed this successfully. So if you post a question to Answers, chances are somebody in the community will come out and talk to you about what they ran into as far as things to look at for risks, what works, what doesn't, tricks for. A big trick is getting those pictures and those photos to match and fit the screen correctly, because that can be a little bit tricky. Also, the Solution Exchange, there's a great website on there. Actually, I want to go ahead and pull this up because I had it ready to go. I'm like, oh, this will be super helpful. So on the Solution Exchange, there is something that basically walks you through everything that I just showed you. How to deploy Laserfiche Weblink, what you need to know, and some helpful hints and tricks and things like that. So that's a good one as well. They also even go in and say that, by the way, if you do have some sort of programmer, somebody that's familiar with HTML, you can actually take this and then basically accelerate it and do quite a bit more. And they give you some sample HTML in here as well. And laserfiche.com/support will have some information as well. If at any time you want to reach out to our team, you can always send an email to consulting@citiesdigital.com, and we'll be more than happy to have somebody reach out and work with you and let you know how we can get this going. So I know that was quick, but at this time, I can answer any questions that you guys might have. Am I using the designer thick client or thin client? This would be the thick client. Yeah, Bradley, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. I think if you use Google Cities Digital or CDI, not Google, but search on YouTube for like Cities Digital or CDI and Laserfiche, you should see it, and then just sort by newest. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm using the thick client. And I'm not sure if there's a web version of the designer or not. I don't have it if there is one. And yeah, I could probably find out the exact version that I'm using as well. If we take a look at that, 1 second. Oh wait, did it tell me right there? So I'm on version 9. So it's probably a little bit older version. I'm sure there's probably a newer one out there. That would be a great thing to look up on the Solution Exchange and the support site that I showed. Oh, okay. So you have access to the browser-based one. That's a good question. Unfortunately, since I've only interacted with this version, I'm not sure what the differences are between the thin client and the thick client, or the web version and the thick client. I'm gonna go ahead and take down your name, and I'll go ahead and do some research after this and figure out what we can get you, and if I can at least maybe point you in the right direction. Yeah, absolutely. I imagine it's similar, but I also think that based on the version that I'm on, I imagine there are probably a few more features and functions that they've added on. So I would also be interested to see. Yeah, for sure. I bet probably probably more functionality rather than less. So you're on 10.1, so that's also kind of like an action item for me. Like we need to probably update ours as well. Today's webinar was something that I knew we hadn't shown, that a lot of people haven't spent a lot of time with. Maybe people didn't know was available or not. So that's the main reason for bringing it up. Yeah. All right, good questions. Anything else? Yeah, so the force refresh is F12. We'll open it up, and then you should be able to, now I'm second guessing myself. I think if you hold Control and then hold the refresh button, it'll do a hard refresh. It should have a hard refresh option. But basically what it'll do is clear the cache and refresh the page. And while I'm thinking about that, that is a helpful trick. Just 1 second. So this is also saying that you can hold the Control key and press F5. F5, by the way, is just, that'll refresh your page. And so it's saying that that'll do a hard refresh. But what I did was I hit F12, brought that up. So actually, let's go back to our preview. Oops. And I held Control, and I think it's doing that, but I think there's also the ability to, I thought there's the ability to hold it down. And I had it written down somewhere too, and I can't find it. But that should work. Let me know if you have issues. I can try and figure out more. So it'd be, yeah, F12 first, and then Control, and then hit refresh. Or hold Control and hit refresh. Good question. Anything else? Well, if that's everything, thank you everybody again for taking the time to view this today. It should be available on YouTube to rewatch, review in the next, probably by the end of today. It's a pretty quick turnaround. And feel free to reach out to our team directly. We'd be more than happy to help you with this. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your week. Bye now.